If you want to ask a question or jump in, by all means, put your hand up and we'll call on you to give you a question. Or, of course, in the meeting chat, then you can post a question in there. So you can just pop a question into chat and we'll spot that and start addressing it. I don't know if anyone's got any questions pre-prepared or anything you want to ask, and quite happy for even people here to ask questions, because I know, for example, Hugh's been doing a survey around DevOps, and so we do like to ask questions and hear back from our community as well. How's that survey going, Hugh?
I'm very pleased, actually, in the response we've had from it. So from our internal development teams working for in Peter Smith Solution Support, we had 100% response. So that was excellent. And probably better than 60% from the external users we sent out to. So there was a selected bunch. Yep, so very good, and it's covered, as the people who filled it in realise, it covers a lot of areas. We were originally aiming to get information to support some of the work we're doing post 2022 in DevOps. So we expanded it a bit to cover lots of other interesting things, including testing and testing and appetite for the cloud, that sort of thing. So it's given us. I've collated some of the results into groups, but it's yet to be the complete survey remains to be done, and we'll provide some output.
Hey,
shall we move across here? Because they can't see you.
No, it's all right. Hugh had his camera on. So
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a big enough view of me.
That's big enough. Yeah, and I hope people are noticing the wonderful new T-shirts or a number of us are wearing. I'll just tilt you can see the proudly wearing the Jade Platform logo T-shirt. And I see Heidi, you've got yours on, very nice. Daniel. Yeah, so we've got a good selection of these. And Marianne, we've put out a message about T-shirts, haven't we?
We're about to send out some comms about that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So the rebranding, this is the platform brand. So everywhere we talk about the Jade platform, the actual core Jade product, then this is the branding and logo that goes with it this year. No, indefinitely. So does anyone have any questions they'd like us to cover? I've got a couple here, but I'd much rather hear from the field or from any customers with any questions or any topics you'd like covered. Linda, thank you. Linda's put a question forward about discussing documentation as code. And the principle is the documentation should be as close to the code as possible. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at that link.
Not yet, no. I'm reading it as we speak.
Well, Ty's a fast reader, so we'll come back to that, Linda. Thank you.
I have a question for Linda. Did Hamish have any influence on that question? Just to
No.
Okay.
No, it's just something I've noticed.
The reason I asked,
been doing.
It was something when Simon, Hamish and I were all at Telstra, something we were aiming for our documentation. So I thought maybe.
Yeah, he's definitely talked about it, to me before. I just thought it was an interesting concept. And I was just wondering, I haven't looked into what we actually do, but I was just wondering if people knew about the concept, dismissed it, or,
At the risk of being frivolous, when I was developing the documentation, wasn't just close to the code, it was the code. But
I think there's actually a good point there that is made in that link that's referenced there, and one that I'm sort of use and sort of push is that unit tests, in fact, are good documentation. So if you specify everything in the, or cover off all the combinations in your unit test, then that's specifying exactly how the method is intended to work and how it would respond to any outside input. So that doesn't give the overall application documentation, but to know the internals of a particular piece of code, then yeah, unit tests are the be all and end all. And if you change the code, then and it doesn't meet pass those unit tests anymore, then that's changing the documentation, because that's always the problem. If the documentation is separate from the code, it doesn't matter how close it is, it will get out of step and out of date. But if it's part of the unit tests, then hey, that is the code and it has to work.
Yeah, that's a good point, Peter. I noticed that's actually called out in the reference that Linda posted, principles.dev. It starts off, unit tests are not just text, but documentation, some of the best forms of documentation. So you're agreeing with the article. It's good.
Yeah, well, definitely on that point. Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, this is all makes general sense. Are we angling for a Jade feature that generates documentation automatically for people like other languages have?
I was just wondering if anybody's talked about it or before.
I mean, we try and keep our documentation as close to their code as possible. I don't really have anything else useful to say, or anything even useful to say.
There are examples of that we could apply, and maybe we can discuss it internally. I can explain what we were doing in outside of Jade. I might have talked to some people here. One is APIs are documentations generated automatically from the code. There's ways to do that. We do that for .NET. The other one is things like configuration, like any file documentation. One way of doing that is you have a default any file in source. All the defaults are shown, and that's the document. What you do is you annotate each setting with a documentation above it. So whenever any developer changes it, they have to change both the setting, the defaults, and the documentation. And it's in. We don't publish our source, so that would be a way of us maintaining that, and we'd ship the ini file with the product. So instead of you locking things up, you use an actual ini file that's fully annotated and all that sort of thing. And when we change defaults, it means we have to change it in the source, right in the source. We change the code, we change the ini file, we change the doc altogether. That's to me, one of the benefits of this product. Just 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other questions or anything people would like to discuss at the moment? Feel free to put something in the chat or to raise your hand. I did have a question. I was curious. I've recently, and people from New Zealand will be aware that we've had quite a highly publicised ransomware attack recently on an IT provider in Wellington. And so that got me looking at a whole bunch of stuff around what Jade's doing in the ransomware area, protecting from it. And one of the really key strategies to defending against a ransomware attack is the quality of your backups. And I was just wondering what people's view of that is. Like, we should be doing offsite backups as often as possible, as often as practical, because obviously a disk-to-disk backup is at risk of being hit by a ransomware attack. That's a traditional thing, that your system gets attacked. They don't just encrypt your database, they encrypt all the backups of your database that are on the same machines. So you're no better off. So the best protection is to have it off-site somewhere else, so that you can pop up another copy of the system. But having said that, you know, we see within the plant quite a lot of instances where systems are not being backed up properly, where customers don't have backups, or where the backups they have are not usable. And so
don't have the journals.
So
Surely not.
these are risks, you know, obviously, in terms of the situations that one ends up with that we've normally involved with. You know, like my database has been corrupted by a bit flip writing the disk, but now I can't restore it. But obviously, if God help us, if a customer was subjected to a ransomware attack, then potentially the lack of backups could be a real problem, because that ransomware attack is not something the plant's going to be able to fix.
Almost certainly not.
Almost certainly not, unless it was one we've done. But so,
In which case, we don't want you to have backup.
so what I was just sort of floating for the group in general was, you know, is there more we could do to make backup safer? And I was curious for the team here, you know, what should customers and users be doing to verify their backups are safe and will work, other than the obvious, you know, like try and do a restore and see if it happens. Are there any other sort of tips and tricks in the backup area?
At the risk of being flippant, I don't know, we've got quite a document on it, actually.
Yeah, we do.
Have we?
Yeah, we do. There's actually good advice, and there's actually do fire drills and practice your restores, because in the past we're aware of lots of clients that were very good at backing stuff up, but they'd never practiced a restore, and when they had to in an emergency, there was something wrong. They hadn't realised, like they may have been missing journals, that sort of thing. Or so yeah, that is in the white paper that Ty referred to.
Is there any verification that you can do on a backup to check that it will work or that it doesn't? You know, like we've got a logical certifier for the database. Is there anything sort of equivalent for a backup?
Yeah.
Oh, over a backup. I would usually recommend just restoring the backup, and then running some certifiers, like a physical certifier. Anyway, because that would basically certify the integrity of the files, which is what you really care about for a backup.
But you wouldn't do that for every backup, would you?
I'm going to put my flippant hat on and say there's no reason not to, because it's just a machine doing it for you. Once you set your automated processes up.
What do we think out in the world? Remember what I said about the more you put into it? Should I pick on someone? No, that would be mean. I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like it's an area where there's potential to do more, but I'm not sure what more we can do.
Is it worth having a workshop, John, on backups and related sort of admin stuff?
Is that something that might be of interest? Marianne, a question. Yes, Marianne, what is your question?
BJ's posted one in the chat.
Oh, I see. Right. Not yours. No, I thought it was starting to look a little bit technical for one of yours.
It's just the BJ one, because there's a Jedi on that, and I was wondering if I should get into that or not.
Okay, so let's come back to that because I just want to do a little bit, just finish off with the backup. What, as a minimum, what we might do is, and Marianne, in the next Jade newsletter, let's put in a link to the backup white paper.
Yep, good reminder.
And I think because it really has brought home to me just how crippling some of that stuff could be. And if you got the double whammy of a ransomware attack and a customer site that didn't have viable backups, you would actually be completely dead in the water.
Yep.
You would not be able to fix the system and you would not be able to restore it. And that is catastrophic. And I would just hate to see that happen to anyone. Okay, so here are some questions. Cool, thank you. Right, so I will read them out and then someone can answer them. So, Brian, is any consideration being given to opening or documenting APIs for the Jade IDE to allow people to develop their own plugins or extensions to the IDE? And I know that, I think that has come up before, hasn't it? Yeah.
In a Jedi, the general response is that we need to consider them on a case-by-case basis.
So particular entry points, like
yeah.
Is there a use case you've particularly got in mind, Brian, or is it a more general question?
I was thinking of examples of doing enforcement of development strategies when you compile methods as one example. Not development standards. Sorry, when you compile methods would be one example. A la what you get in Visual Studio with tools that help you make your code nice to start with.
I don't know if Kevin Saul's on the call, but he's put quite a comprehensive Jedi about this, and he's given lots of examples that he's thought of.
Okay.
So we haven't ruled it out or written yet, but
right.
Cool.
I mean, on the surface, unless it breaks things, that is a way to allow people to extend the IDE without having to do any work. So, win for the team.
Yep, that's an argument for it. There's some arguments against that we discussed in the team. But...
Yes. My Jade IDE keeps crashing.
Yeah, that would be one. The user code that's written would be running as the system. So
that would be interesting, yeah, from a security and privilege point of view. Yeah. Okay. All right, so interesting. So that we'll definitely think about that and look at the Jedi. And actually, I guess that's the other thing is that if people have feelings in this space, then they can go to the Jedi and add comments, which will keep things tidy. And I presume the Jedi is reasonably easy to find.
Yep, it's got those sort of words in it.
Yeah, it's got those sort of
words. I just searched up extension in it. It's probably the first one.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you want to find that Jedi, search for extension in Jedi and add some comments.
I might be the third one. Anyway, you know what? I'll post a link to it on the chat.
Thank you, Ty. That'd be extraordinarily helpful. So now we've got a question from Dan in Australia. This should be a quick one. Trivial yet frustrating. Jade 2020 changed the Control Q functionality. Control Q. What does that do? Yet pressing F4 in the class browser hasn't changed. Can we revert the Control Q functionality, e.g. typing list B, you could press enter and then go straight to the list box class. Now you have to arrow down to the class before pressing enter, and he's just got a screenshot.
I never heard of Control Q before. It brings up a quick navigation dialog box, and the suggestion looks very sensible to me. So we might just pass it along.
Okay. So probably.
What version do you want? 2020?
2020. It says we changed it in 2020.
like upgrading something.
Is it changed to 22? Is it reversed in 22? We're not going to hot fix it, right? How interesting.
So what he says,
Yes, okay, I see.
yeah,
Yeah.
if I do that, it's not, well, it is now, isn't it? But anyway,
Yeah, well,
we'll have a look at that.
we'll have a look at that.
Yeah.
Yes. And then from Paul, is there a good example of OAuth token authentication for a JSON producer consumer solution? I see documentation for JSON REST services for 2018, but it doesn't mention tokens, etc.
So that will be 2020 for anything with OAuth. And you should have just documentation of how to do that in 2020. So it was new feature in 2020, and there's documentation of how to do that. I believe there are some examples as well in there.
So in the actual mainline documentation, or is it in a white paper? Or
mainline.
Mainline for 2020.
Yeah. And one thing is, so were they saying client side or server side?
I think he said both computer and consumer. So
because I mean we can do it from both. From the client side, you just put the token in the auth header. It's actually that part's quite nice and simple, hopefully, and the documentation will say how to do that. And then from server side, you can also secure your Jade REST services with OAuth, with data loop tokens.
Okay, so Paul, we can actually see you, which is great. I can see your reactions as we answer this. Yeah. So the answer is that it should be in the mainline documentation for Jade 2020. What I suggest is you have a quick look there, and if you have any, if you've got any further questions, just fire something through to Jade support, and we'll
flick it towards me. And
something like you have make use of that. Like, is there a living example of it?
There's nothing in Era 1 with OAuth, I think. I did have a demo schema.
there is a version of Era 1, but not public.
Yeah, probably that we've used for a demo, is that right?
Yep.
Yep. I mean, I have a demo system with an example lying about anyway.
One thing to add, there's more to come. So REST is something we've been improving every release, and there's another extension in this area on the roadmap.
Right. So I mean, REST is a core functionality for us. We will continue to develop and enhance in every release. But specifically that OAuth stuff, you should be able to code your way through it.
Yep.
There should be good documentation, and if there isn't, we'll improve it. We'll beat Tim.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we might do that.
Okay, if there's a problem with the functionality, you can beat me up. If there's a problem with documentation, then we'll beat Janet up.
I have a question.
I think,
Are there any version specific limitations on that? So Paul mentioned 2018, which means he might be on 2018.
Yeah, starting from 2020.
Talk to that guy.
So yeah, the at least the support for server side 2020, you could do it from 2018, like adding a token client side, but like there's not a nice API to help you. This is a new 2020 feature, probably the main thing. But I can probably, flick something through to support. They'll get it through to me, and I can probably help you out getting something at least going in 2018.
Good.
If you're looking at the client side.
Good.
It just might be a bit more work.
Good answer. Thank you. Very helpful. Right. So we've got a couple of other questions. So I have a question. How to identify excessive time in database transactions for any Jade process? Can I get a stack dump for each process to identify problem code?
Should we mention card schema Instrumentation, transaction instrumentation.
Can do.
I don't know. I don't know.
Monitor or profiler. Yeah.
Well, the monitor and the profiler are there, but card schema, I believe, has a functionality in it to instrument transactions.
Yep.
So you can see exactly what's going on and which ones are taking the time.
Martin Jagus did a good talk. I think it was at 2019 Juggle about that.
Okay, so I'm not sure that question came through Marianne, so I'm not quite sure who posed that question, but that's the simple answer for excessive, and I'm not sure whether they mean specifically in the database, like in Transstate, for example, how to identify excessive time in database transaction for any Jade process, because that could also be like extended locks or something, which was my first thought, which is why I'd probably go to monitor for an extended lock.
If you were there right now, like if your system, you were looking at your system and there was some transaction that was just had been going for 2 days, that'd work.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in general, the card schema ability to instrument transactions is quite generally useful. And card schema can be added to any Jade system. You don't need to be a user of the managed service or anything like that. And it's free license, so it can just be downloaded from the website. I hope that's enough of an answer. If there's
a part 2 there. Can I get a stack dump for each process? Yes. There's code in there. We on process class that'll give you the call stack, current call stack, and everything like that.
Is that but that's a machine level stack dump, right?
No, that's a Jade.
Oh, the Jade stack. Okay. Yes, there is. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that's enough of an answer. If it's not, then again, feel free to contact support and they'll be pleased to help.
Or even post another question.
Right.
And the monitor will also give you those call stacks for any running Jade process, as well as it will give you a profile of all the processes that will, or the time it takes for all of the methods on that process for a certain amount of time.
There's another thing too, is if this is happening in a development environment. So, you're running your app and it's taking ages and you want to know what it's doing. You can use the interrupt menu item of the system tray, and that will throw up an exception dialog, which will show you the call stack. And you can sort of see what it's doing, and then you can continue, which means it just goes back, carries on doing what it's doing, and you can do it again, and that'll give you some idea of where the code is in 2 points in time. And if you need more, you just keep doing it a few more times, and you can break execution as well if you want to throw it all away. It's not something you do in production, though.
That's right. Thank you. I'd forgotten that. I have done that occasionally from time to time. Good point, Nick. Okay, and we might as well take the next question as well. And this is interesting. I might even help answer this myself. Have you got plans to make the Jade language easier to take up for new developers? I think Jade should try and direct itself or have a toggle so it could be more like a common language in the market. The problem new developers have is that unless you have a senior developer working with them, it's very difficult to learn how to do something. With a common language, you can just type into Google and up comes an answer 90% of the time. This could solve a huge problem the majority of companies using Jade have, and that is finding developers. It restricts growth and is one of the biggest concerns I have using Jade.
Do we need a Jade Stack Overflow?
Yeah.
Well, there is one.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. So funnily enough, this is something that we're just looking at and thinking about at the moment
and doing.
What?
We keep improving, adding features to the language to make it more like.
Well, yes.
Languages out there.
Well, that part's yes. So one of the things we're looking at, in fact, I've got meetings scheduled this week, is talking about different ways of getting more developers into that pool. We do hear that from our customers and partners. We still have a couple of polytechs that are teaching courses based on Jade, notably SIT and Invercargill is still teaching Jade as a language.
And UCS as well.
And yeah,
University of Canterbury.
University of Canterbury, UOC. Yep. And ARA is looking at reintroducing it, funnily enough.
Yes. So previously they were teaching it as a first year paper, and they're now looking at doing it as a third year paper.
Yes. So yeah, we recognise the issue of the size of the Jade developer pool. It's an interesting question because in theory, swapping languages shouldn't be that difficult if you're an experienced developer in a Java or .NET type environment. Picking up Jade shouldn't be that hard, but there does seem to be a barrier there.
It's not the language per se, I don't think. I mean, the Jade language is very modular 2, Pascal.
Yeah.
It's very simple
Yeah.
language, but it's the whole, if you like, it's the framework and all the extra stuff.
Well, something I picked up on while learning Jade was when you're doing something in Python or C# or whatever, you can just Google simple things and it'll give you an answer, but you can't with Jade. So you really have to be good at reading the documentation. And I picture a lot of people coming through university nowadays don't read much documentation at all.
They just rely on Stack Overflow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really what's catching a lot of people out.
Bad. One of the issues we've definitely identified is that people coming from other languages simply can't do all of the things that they could before. We're aiming to rectify it. But you've got to be in the latest sort of.
And then the other side of it is if we've got interop with other languages, we need to do our best to support what's coming in. There's features that we don't support that makes it hard to control.
The other approach that we have thought about in the past is using something like the .NET API so that you're actually writing code in .NET and using proxy objects to get into the Jade database, which is something we use successfully in Jade Third Eye, for example. Interesting question though, and certainly one that, as I say, we are thinking about at multiple levels. And there's a final question, and I don't know who can answer this, but I want to be able to add log-on security to our dev environment, but have no clue where to even start writing and creating our own security DLL. Is there any plan or way to make an alternative way to be able to set up security without needing to create a DLL?
Would a sample be of value?
You mean a sample DLL?
I think we have a sample DLL that sets that up, but
they might want something like that authenticates with Active Directory and that sort of thing. Yeah. I know some clients have asked for that.
I was thinking about,
not only for the IDE, but for their apps. Common one is Azure AD for single sign-on. Potentially we could make a sample reusable component.
That's interesting. Like, I think we talked. Did we talk earlier, Hugh, about making single sign-on, doing some work to help support single sign-on within the product? For user systems developed using.
Yeah, it could be an independent component once we find out the users that are still asking for it.
Yeah,
I know that there was some interest in it. People have solutions for doing that for web interfaces.
Yeah, that was the thin client.
Yes, the thin client. If there's demand, maybe we should put out a Jedi and see what interest there is in it.
Of course, JTM does that. I mentioned it passing.
So for
does what?
It authenticates against.
I think you're doing it against Active Directly and direct. When I checked with Ops, I don't think it's going directly to Azure AD.
No, it's not going to Azure AD. It's going to
Yeah. So that
Using the Jade security library that they do, or
it's hooked into Get and Validate.
It's using Karma DLL or something.
Yeah.
Jade Dev Security, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't write it.
So the point there is it's actually free because if you're using card schema, you get karma.dll, but I don't know if it's documented for you.
That's a good question. Yeah.
If it's not, we could probably get it documented.
What are we? So where do we end up with all this? Well, going back to the fundamental question, I want to add log on security to our dev environment, but I have no clue how to write a DLL. How do we help him?
So 2 options: document how to do it with karma.dll if it's appropriate, or provide a source sample.
A skeleton.
Yeah.
Is there any reason the authentication, like the whatever mechanism, is done within Jade itself, or is that a bad idea? Because then,
well, that's what I was wondering.
Like, does it have to go through a DLL, or could it be entry points within Jade that they implement?
Possibly.
we want to integrate with somebody else's authentication. Sure. So, I don't really want to. I'm not sure that the storing tables of information inside Jade itself would be that useful. So we want to delegate all of that to the other auth provider.
Yep. From memory, the Karma DLL uses the Windows SSPI, Service Security Service Provider, so you can plug it. And our version goes to a local Active Directory, not.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to the local.
It's synced from AAD, so it's, that's how it works.
Would it be possible for us to give a sample security DLL? What would you need to use that? You'd need to have Visual Studio and you'd be able to compile it, wouldn't you?
I'm just checking to see whether there's actually already code in demo DLL.
There is.
Is it?
Yeah, you can just run it, change user codes and password.
There you go. There's already a sample.
That
What
sample
does it-
doesn't
how
use
does-
Active Directory.
How does it authenticate?
No, but
Codes and passwords.
It's hard coded, is it?
Yeah.
yeah, but
It's just an example of DLL. But
still need to do a bit of work.
Okay. So I think the upshot of that is the demo DLL provides a skeleton DLL, but you would have to do more work if you wanted to integrate it with AD or something like that. We'll give some thought to providing a demo version that does directly interface to Zero AD. And that's it, probably.
Well, we can do the local AD. Is that what you said? We've got an example.
Yes, we've got an example for the local AD as well.
That might be of use to some people, and then the Azure AD is, but feasible.
Okay.
I've got a question from Marianne.
Okay.
She said, can we integrate Jade source code with a Git repository on Jade 2020?
Jade 2020. She's sending her questions to you now.
What? No, I think that was earlier.
She must have, all right. Or Jade 2020.
Well, I'm sitting here watching Anthony with his microphone muted still. There we go.
The only Git integration that we put into the Jade product went into 2018, where we have a Git client, but it hardly counts as integration between Jade and a Git repository. There's lots of this is an area that we've been putting a lot of work into to try and resolve. There are still a lot of fundamental paradigm differences between maintaining a model and maintaining source files, and it's a continuing area of work that we're doing to try and understand and resolve those issues that we have that are fundamental, basically around we incrementally evolve a model in Jade, which is very different to constructing artifacts from source files. So at the moment, we 2020 doesn't have close integration between Git and Jade. Internally, we store some sources in Git, but it has manual steps to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, they mentioned 2022 as well. Do you want to talk about how we've made things easier and are keeping on making things easier, getting closer?
I mean, we're making incremental steps. I mean, fundamentally, Jade was not designed around source files and certainly wasn't designed around Git. If you were to design a product from scratch again, you might consider Git as a starting point, but back in the early 90s, that certainly wasn't an option. There are some fundamental issues around our extract files that we're working hard to try and resolve so that we can split source more seamlessly into separate class files and have them load independently. But these are very much incremental steps at the moment so that you can look towards storing source as individual class files and load them more seamlessly into Jade.
Which is obviously a prerequisite for moving to a more Git-based storage system.
Yes.
And I think the key message is that we're doing a lot of work in this area and continuing to work in this area, and each release should move us closer, I guess. And I liked your comment about, when it was originally designed, Anthony, because I have to keep reminding myself that Jade predates the internet. It was predating the internet. It was developed on 386 and 486 class machines. There's a lot happened, and so it's actually a tribute to the flexibility of the product that something that was written against the 3.3 beta release will still compile and run, in fact, very quickly, run very fast on today's hardware environment without source code changes. In the meantime, I know people that gave up computing after they tried to convert stuff from VB5 to VB6. So, the Jade product has demonstrated its flexibility over the years. I had a question, and I think probably Nick might be the best one to answer this. I was really keen on the idea of the mocking classes and stuff that's in 2022, but what's the best way to get started with that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just wrote it. I don't use it. One of the thoughts I sort of had as I was working on it was that for a user that's got a large system which has got huge components in it which they're not interested in and they don't want to test, I thought, the way they can just sort of mock that whole method call out so that you only need to test just the little bits that you do within a big system. I don't know if if you have the luxury of you're writing your system from scratch and you're writing all your unit tests as you develop your code, then you could bring the mocking framework in. It may be less useful in that situation because all of your tests have got simple methods to test. You don't need to drop out huge components. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear feedback from users that start using it. And we open sourced it, and I'm keen to get ideas. People want to take it down a different path. Ty's got a question.
Surely Tim's written a dev course training module around mocking. Wouldn't he be the person?
Did I ask the wrong person? Are you telling me you're hinting at?
I mean, I think you're hinting that I should write such a thing.
Have there been none? There you go. There you go. There could be a potential module for the developer training course.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I think, because I was actually reflecting on this before, that the whole sort of testing and quality environment now is quite, I wouldn't say complex, but we've got unit tests, we've got ATCG, we've now got ATF, and we've got mocking classes. And for someone that's only sort of an occasional developer these days, it's quite hard to get my head around how that all plugs together and what do I use each bit for to assure myself that I've got the quality people have come to expect from JTM. Should I be writing unit tests? Should I be implementing ATF? What should I do to improve my quality?
Yes.
Maintain my quality.
Should I be writing unit tests? Should I be writing ATCG tests? Yes. Yes.
And
hopefully that helps.
As I understand it, ATF kind of automates that process, automates the running of them.
Yes. So the unit tests, you'll test one small little component. Basically, you're testing a block of code, usually a method. With the unit test. With ATCG, it's like a human is piloting it, going through, using it like a human would, except instead of a human doing it, it's a machine doing it very, very fast.
And that's mainly exercising the UI.
Yes, and also kind of the integration of how everything fits together. Then ATF just basically lets you run a bunch of tests and rather than you having to go, I want to run this test, now I want to run this test one, I want to run this test sort of manually, it will automatically handle it for you.
Gather results and give you like a dashboard afterwards that said you ran 20 and 18 worked.
Yeah, and then you can go and query it and go, okay, the two that didn't work, this is what happened and all of that sort of stuff. Okay. And then mocking is a tool that's really good for when you've got this big gnarly system that's all kind of tangled together. Not that, of course, JTM would be like that. I'm sure it's very well engineered. But if you do have a very large system where you've got a bunch of complex components that depend heavily on each other, they're tightly coupled, mocking's really good at kind of pulling that apart in your testing and going, hey, I care about this one particular part, and all of this nasty components that it's tangled up with, I'm just going to kind of mock them out. And whenever we would try and use them, I'm going to instead not and pretend I did. And that way I can focus on testing one small part at a time. So mocking is very valuable in those sort of situations.
You can sort of, I'll use the term sort of fake or mock out behavior too. Like you could, if you're going to test a GUI, but it's going to run in an automatic mode. Well, you don't want to be presenting something to the user and waiting for a response, but you can create a mock that will give you back the right answer so that you can test your code. Or if you wanted to give you a wrong answer, so you can test what your code does when it's given invalid, you could do that with the mock.
So actually, for someone who's got, say, a jetted system, mocking might actually be quite good.
Oh yeah,
because they are quite large, complex.
There would be big bits of it that you don't, in order to run your test, you don't want to have to do all this other stuff.
Yeah. Interesting.
Can I just make a comment on that? Don't get diverted by the fact you're thinking, hey, look, it's mocking is for complex type things. You can have quite simple things that you just want to exclude a particular behavior, or you want to poke a known result into something. So mocking is important, even sort of down at the low level where you've got something quite simple. If you want to have if your method has a call to something else, you don't want to call that something else, you can then feed in particular results into it, so that you can then make sure you're testing all the paths through your piece of code. So yeah, not just complex systems.
Okay, are you using it in anger, Peter, at the moment?
Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of 2022, so but the general principle, and I mean, you don't have to use, I think people who've got earlier systems have different ways of mocking things out, or Nick's even mentioned faking, but you can mock things out in other ways without using the mocking framework. I think the mocking framework does makes it a lot easier and gives some structure to what different teams might be doing in different ways. But yeah, still very important for even the simple things, even the new stuff that you're writing. Very important.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that it's 2:55, so we generally would finish our sessions just before the hour, so that you've got time to get to your next meeting. I know most of the people in this room have got a meeting immediately at 3. So are there any sort of last questions or thoughts? One thing, I guess, Marianne, I'm not sure if we're doing any formal feedback, but I'd certainly be really interested to hear back whether this has been useful for you or interesting. We had envisaged scheduling another one, next year sometime, because it's just a good chance for everyone to have a chat. But certainly feedback would be much, much appreciated. Do you want to say anything, Marianne?
Yeah, we certainly can ask for feedback in the comms that we're going to be sending after this. Look forward to getting it. But I have to say, I imagine it's going to be pretty great feedback because these discussions have been super interesting. So well done, and give yourselves a pat on the back. That's what I'd say.
Oh, thank you so much. Look, yeah, I thought it was fun, but it's always a little bit hard to tell when you're not at the end of the wire, because we're all just in the big room, like partying up. So, yeah, this
is how the Jade plant party is.
We all wear our t-shirts. Look, we might try and send out a survey monkey or something, Marianne, maybe just something with a few questions, just so that we get some feedback. Obviously, we want to make this useful for everybody, and so if we can get some ideas of anything that would make it better,
yeah, of course.
Stop doing it; it'll be so much better. No, okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming and giving up an hour of your day, and I hope we'll see you all in the new year. Thank you.